Watching Josh's bonsai journey progress has been something that's been really interesting and incredibly exciting to participate in. From the selection of the material, the first time that he wired, the first time that he repotted, and then him taking on ownership of bonsai as a practice when he styled his Mugo pine. Now we get to watch Josh try his hand at the deciduous approach to bonsai on this very special honeysuckle, and I can't wait to see what he's thinking, what he's wrestling with, and how he goes about tackling the problem as a beginner of handling a deciduous tree for the very first time. Here we go.
Hey guys, here we go again with another tree.
The trepidation of Josh and bonsai is so charming.
Well, look at that. Good times.
So I will say this, when we were at the nursery and Josh was selecting this tree, this branch was what drew him to this tree. And he knew nothing about bonsai when we were selecting this, but he said, this is the branch that I played on as a kid. And tapping into that memory I thought was so spectacular. It will be interesting to see what he does with this branch over the styling. I'm really interested to see.
I really don't want to get rid of this branch because when I initially got it, it reminded me of like the first branch that I would want to climb up onto if I was to climb on a tree. And like I said, the honeysuckle already reminded me of my backyard. These leaves get really big, so I think the bigger the silhouette, the smaller those leaves look. But I'll start cleaning this up. I'm actually kind of glad we waited because there's so much more to work with now. I didn't break any of the pine branches when I was structurally wiring them, but I'm assuming this will happen. It will happen.
So when you start the process of cleaning up deciduous material, again, we fall in love with this characteristic of a tree. And a lot of times what we fall in love with by the time we go through the process of objectively looking at the tree might not be something that's as valuable in the end. And already I'm seeing components to this tree that are incredibly interesting, and it'll be fun to see what Josh does with them. But that process of cleaning out dead branches, as mindless as it seems, is what gets us into the bonsai flow. And Josh said cleaning out structural issues or structural problems. That is a really great place to start, but we have to remove ourselves from the emotional attachment to be able to address that appropriately. So I'm excited to see if Josh can objectively look at this tree or if he's gonna maintain that attachment to some of those emotional components of the tree.
This going straight up and not being bendable means I should probably get rid of it. I want to stick to some of the kind of rules of bonsai, but also me as a creative, I tend to, even when beginning something, I'd like to look at it from a different perspective and just choose what feels good to me, and then I can learn from those choices later, even if they are mistakes in the end. This happens with pretty much any creative foray in my life, where I try new things and some stuff sticks and is something I want to keep with me as my own approach, and other things are, you know, just learning, ways of learning by making mistakes. To the bend to the right at the top of the left branch of the middle trunk you mentioned earlier is a bit distracting. Not sure if bending or removing is the best answer.
So this is really interesting, right? Just hearing the Mirai community's dialogue with Josh as he's working through this. There is a kind of fundamental thing that we can be looking at this as a perspective-based point to jump off from, and that is the merit of the material thick and powerful, or is it thin and slender and delicate? And when we start to associate thick and powerful, typically we think short and wide in the canopy. When we see slender and delicate, we tend to think tall and narrow. And when we see this tree is slender, and it's relatively tall, but it's also wide. And so just from an immediate perspective of how do we take advantage of slender, delicate, elegant material, which when we source nursery stock is a very common characteristic that nursery stock has, then we start to think about, with that, maximizing that tall, slender delicacy means reducing that width in terms of the size of the canopy. And it feels to me, just jumping off as Josh is listening to the advice of the community, that might be a really good place to start. How do we find the most interesting lines, knowing we want to reduce the width of the silhouette? Let's see what he does.
That's probably the first branch that I'm going to try to wire, is this one, if that's what you're talking about, because it is too straight. And I'll try my best to keep it alive because I really like this branch. But as Ryan has said, don't attach yourself to parts of a tree. I'll try not to, but I also want to make the best use of it because I appreciate it as kind of a character element of the tree.
Look at the bark. This is the best part of honeysuckle. The bark, and look at the way that the branches jog through. The growth habit of honeysuckle is spectacular.
Wiring this branch, I want to at least try and put some movement into it and get and even just have a test for how to wire these branches, what it feels like. It'll be helpful to do.
Copper wire on deciduous. Now this is a thicker deciduous bark. It can probably tolerate the copper wire. It's more abrasive, it's harder. On softer bark deciduous, we typically go aluminum. I see where Josh is at. If we're using copper on deciduous, we might paper wrap it. But this is a thicker bark deciduous. Let's see how it goes for him and see if he can avoid really marring up the trunk and branches with the copper wire. Copper definitively gives us a better hold. It's all about technique. All about technique, and specifically how you support the wire with your offhand.
A part of me is also probably, to be honest, putting off wiring this because it's pretty daunting.
Wiring is daunting.
This is tough. This is tough, guys. Use a longer wire and carry it up onto another trunk you are going to wire. Oh, yeah.
Well, unless you're going to pair it with another
That's a
branch.
good point.
We never use another trunk as an anchor unless we do the preformed hook. I like Josh's approach from the beginning.
I don't know how much it will really be able to move. It might
You can't move it, don't wire it.
It might be helpful higher up in the tree. So
that
if
could
I
work.
use the
I
same
can see
wire to wrap around this as I do around this, is that worth it when the next junction with branches is up here? Because up here I could just wire these two with the same wire.
Okay, this is an interesting question in terms of bonsai approach. You have this lower piece, you don't have anything to wire it to. He's trying the preformed hook. He recognizes the preformed hook is going to have a hard time anchoring and might do more damage. It is a deciduous tree, softer bark. Do I wire up another trunk? Do I wire up another trunk to anchor? Never, right? Do I wire up another trunk to join this lower piece to a piece up higher that I know this wire can move, change the shape of, and I want to be changing that shape and moving that piece? Yes, this is where it makes sense. And even though they fork up at the top, we still, by combining those two up at the top, again, that's a very high pressure situation to try and join these two pieces at the very top of a tree. So to bring this branch from the bottom up to the top and then wire this one to now that piece anchored by that thicker wire, this makes total sense. Let's see what he chooses to do.
Thank you guys so much. I'm gonna end things here, but please join me next week. Like I said, we'll do another one. You guys have been helping so much, and I appreciate it a ton in my journey to becoming a replacement for Ryan Neal on Mirai. So,
Cultivating Josh to take over the streams.
I did also, with these branches that I cut off, I'm kind of playing with how bendable they are, and I had suggestions in chat to massage the branches. Once I massaged it, it was very easy to bend. So I'll keep that in mind while I'm wiring it.
Very good. Okay, a few points here to keep in mind. Number one, cut off branches. Bend them, break them, bend them till they break. This is something that you have discarded of, that is no longer a part of the tree, and gives you some sort of notion of the feel, of potential, the ability. What happens when we just bend? What happens when we bend and slightly rotate, right? How does that work? Massaging, be careful, right? To massage a branch and soften it up. This is, although effective, because in between those cellular bundles of vascular tissue, there's a concrete called pectin that binds that together. And as you massage, you start to create movement between those vascular bundles. That seems like a good idea, but that can also overwork a branch and cause it to die, create vascular ruptures, and have some negative consequences and circumstances occur. But using that branch as a piece of information and learning how you handle that tissue, one of the smartest things we can take from what Josh is doing.
We'll see how this goes. We're back with this winter honeysuckle, after a week off, and guess what? I didn't wire a thing. I have, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sizes of aluminum wire.
He's going aluminum.
That Sam delivered to me from Mirai. I'm using my big toe to scroll my mouse so that I can see your messages. It's not working as I intended. Am I going up or down? I would probably want to, oh.
Here's the thing, right? We have this lower branch coming off to the left. If we're talking about elongating that design and reducing the width of the silhouette, then the only way to use that lateral branch is to bring it up as another trunk like the other pieces in the tree. To drop it down is to widen the silhouette. To drop it down is to differentiate from the rest of the design. And in nursery stock specifically, we see this being such a common thing, whether it's deciduous, whether it's a hinoki cypress, whether it's a pine, whether it's a juniper. These lower branches that are long, and we have these slender, tall trunks where we see the impact and the necessity to elongate the design and narrow the silhouette. And then we have this big, long, out of proportion, impossible to use branch, and that's where we've got to go ahead and let go. Either bring it up to a trunk or go ahead and sacrifice that piece and move on with a different design.
And then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and then I can cut it off. And I haven't used, with a preformed hook with aluminum wire, is it that dependable compared to copper?
A little bit less, but still functional. A little bit less, but still functional. And if a branch breaks, it didn't exist anyways, right? That's the way we have to move forward with design. You cannot be impaired by fear. You gotta go. You gotta do bonsai.
Oh, or shove it in the container all the way down with good contact to the trunk. Okay. And so I can definitely drop the wire into the soil here.
Go around the backside
and then wrap it up and go up. Or I can wire this branch and then also bring it up to this branch and connect the two.
You're gonna have to go with big, heavy aluminum to get this done though. Bigger aluminum than copper for sure.
Oh, crushing this bark makes me want to cry. Try and get this done. The second turn probably needs to be closer to here, not out here. I'm trying. Definitely got the feel for the aluminum. Should I do this over again, guys? And I don't know if, this is hard.
That's where structural wire goes to die in terms of losing its function. Oh, you lunged, Josh. You lunged right on the most
I don't know if this
delicate part. Notice that junction where the two branches are and that big long turn. That's where we put all of the force on the shoulder of that branch.
I don't feel good about
where it
going
connects.
further.
Careful.
I think my angles are not great here. I could have had tighter turns because this is kind of the first
No,
point,
his
right?
first 3 turns are impeccable. After that, it goes downhill.
Go with that movement. I'm going to be raising it, turning it. About that.
See the wire moving at the base right as it comes over the trunk? He's trying to raise, and it's actually creating a lever that's pulling the wire out of the holdings in the container.
Something's happening. Witness me. I moved a branch.
So whenever we go about structural movement, you have to think about the desired rotation. Josh is moving the branch to the back. He has to be rotating in that clockwise direction or it's never gonna work because his wire is applied in the clockwise direction. Now when he was just moving it, the base of that wire had no function. He put that supporting hand on the base of that wire and now all of a sudden it gained function. But you gotta be thinking, this is a branch that exists in the front of the tree and he's moving it to the back of the tree, right? The structure of the tree, where those branches or trunks originate is where they need to exist. So no matter what he wants to do, it's gotta stay where it's at in relationship to the other pieces on the tree. Let's see how he handles it.
I need it to move.
See now if he just rotated with the wire, there it is.
It makes me feel good. really, I need to not be overly ambitious here.
Boy, I feel like if he just took that rotation and brought that piece
here,
up
so
and
the movement of
around,
the tree is going
he's
to the
set up.
right.
But here's one thing he is doing. He's closing that angle. This is nice.
Space. Guys, I'm actually getting a vision, and then just have what I've wired be what remains, and then I can wire these finer branches later. Get closer.
Okay, I guess that's one way to go
Leave a
about
stub.
it.
Oh, I want to leave a stub. I don't want to cut it flush.
Okay. When we start to talk about pruning deciduous branches, do we leave a stub or do we go flush to the trunk? Do we have a bud at the base? Do we see a swollen raised section called the shoulder of the branch already established? On deciduous trees, the draw of water through that section is so important to maintain that if we don't see a shoulder, which is the tree saying, I have the ability to compartmentalize this cut so it doesn't cause any problem with water flow, if we don't see that raised shoulder, then we always leave a stub. But if you see that raised shoulder, or at the base of the honeysuckle, there was a little bud right there, go ahead and cut it flush, because it means the tree is adapted to water flow and compartmentalizing that cut. Good first step for Josh.
Jason said it's a great stub. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that.
Good stub, Josh. You want to leave one internode, one space to the bud. That's what a stub needs to be.
That is a significant difference. Ryan is going to look at that and be disappointed. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. All right, we can leave it there for now. I've manhandled this this branch enough, I think. Okay, maybe try pulling it forward and see if you like it better.
He saved it. It's coming back.
We can leave it for now. I feel better about that.
back.
I just don't. I think now that it's going off to the left and not wrapping around the back of the tree,
Better.
it feels better to me.
Better.
All right,
Still
guys.
needs
So
to
I'm going to
come
move
up
on
more
to
and
another
close that
branch.
gap.
Next branch. I like this brought down though. I like this brought down. I wonder how this engages with the foreground. Trying to follow my gut. It's difficult because my bonsai gut is not as well established as I would like.
He does ultimately make good decisions. I have to say this about Josh. I've been so impressed with his journey because he really is a student of creative endeavors.
Crap, my camera's about to die. Let me switch batteries. You're not going to be able to hear me for a second as well. I don't feel terrible about this. I feel pretty good. Josh's crotches are very cute. I do try to keep my crotches as cute as possible. As you can see, this one here, very cute. Look at this cute little guy. This crotch here, looking great.
I feel like that was an autocorrect of acute turned to cute.
Masculine crotch.
And then Josh took it as a compliment that his crotch was cute.
Bring this down a little bit more, right?
Rotate with the wire, Josh. He's fighting having used too thin of a wire. That's the first problem, right? Continuing to bend because it's a little bit too thin. But every time he rotates with the wire, the bend holds. Watch this, okay? Rotating with, bend holds. It's just, it's automatic. I like that acute crotch. It's nice.
I think something happened. Should I get rid of this little branch here?
Cut it back. Don't take off structural pieces. There's no structural flaw there. That's a structural piece. It's a branch originating from a trunk. Don't take that off. You would just regrow that if you cut it off. Those are pieces that add to ramification.
Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.
This is nice. Okay. Okay, so this is interesting because initially, before we had defined the line of the trunk from the base to the highest point, the tip, we cut that long piece off, or I shouldn't say we, Josh chose to cut that long piece off. When you look at the hierarchy of what is the thickest trunk, that we choose to use in the design, it's the trunk that moves off to the right side of the tree. And where Josh is saying, I don't have back branches, I don't have this, I don't have that, that's the piece that he cut off before he had decided on the design and defined. First thing when we wire, define the line base to tip, base of the tree to the highest foliar point, and typically 99 times out of 100, that's gonna come off of the thickest piece, right? That is the natural growth habit of a tree. Obviously circumstantial, and there are creative opportunities to play on that and break away from that kind of common concept of the tree's physiological growth habit. But in this instance, we are seeing where the piece on the left is the longest, tallest piece, and that thicker, more dominant piece on the right is now becoming subordinate, and it's creating a really interesting kind of awkward aesthetic. I have no idea where this is gonna go.
So just 22 minutes late after some technical difficulties. I did move this guy down a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of the sudden curve of it, but we're leaving that there for now.
Just on a technical note, when we start to talk about movement, right, we're talking about different angles, different spaces, different planes. And when we think about this kind of curvature in the branch, boom, curvature here, and we say, Josh is saying, I'm not super excited about that. We always want to make that curve, return, and one more. And that's what takes us out of the loop into the loop, boom, right? Just a subtle change, subtlest of change, and our eye picks it up and it reconciles all of those feelings of discomfort.
This one's a little bit more meh, but I really don't think I'd be able to move it unless it was like thick copper wire. I mean, I could try.
Maybe double
but
up.
It was already hard enough bending this branch with the really thick gauge.
Yeah,
so I don't think a step up in branch size, it will be possible.
So whenever you start to think about, is a branch bendable or not, and you're thinking, I don't have a thick enough gauge, maybe a thick enough gauge doesn't exist, this is really where the guy wire concept of bending comes in, where we actually use kind of a pull point and we utilize a much thinner wire to just give directional application of force. This is something maybe I can teach Josh after this piece of work.
I'm trying to drop this branch back here because there's nothing going on in the back of the tree right now. So I think I'm going to drop this down as much as I can. No.
Okay, here we have a very, very common situation. If you noticed in that short little blip, every time Josh moved the branch, it returned to its original position, which is either to say it's too stiff to be bent or the wire is not thick enough. And I'm guessing, just by looking at it, that the wire is not thick enough. And what that does is then we suddenly force the branch, because it's not holding with that thinner wire, and we push it past its point of tolerance. This is where you always use the wire that allows you to move the branch in any position. One more gauge, and I'm guessing with Josh, 1.5 more gauge on this one, and he would have been able to move it, which probably would have helped him. Maybe not nullify or avoid the break, but certainly would have helped him establish the position he wanted and potentially avoided that break. When we start to talk about aluminum, we say if the wire is half of the branch's thickness, generally it is a gauge that will allow you to move that branch anywhere. If we're at 1/3 of the thickness in the diameter of the wire, you might be on the fence about getting it to be able to position it anywhere. And if we're any smaller than that, which is what we're looking at in the current situation of Josh's wire choice for the branch diameter, there's no way it's gonna hold anything.
Okay, I broke the branch. It happened. It's actually my first time breaking a branch when bending it. This is the front branches. And back here, I wanted to fill up the space to make it kind of have some background elements. Not too discouraged, but also kind of sad. Should I just cut this off and then leave this branch here and then hope that it buds?
Yeah.
Is that the plan?
Which is perfectly acceptable for a deciduous tree. Now, one thing Josh could have helped himself with is putting that last turn up over the top of that break. Boom, top of that break, and now you can pull that break down. It'll bud back on a deciduous tree.
I guess I'll just leave it there then. Eve's here. Nice. Eve, thank you. I know, I'm absolutely killing. I actually am killing it because I killed off, I broke off this branch, so I'm well on my way to killing this tree.
Which I actually think that branch being shorter helps the design.
Statement. Guys, this is hard. This whole bonsai thing is hard. Every time I touch my tree, I'm just like, sorry, dude. You know? Let's see here what you guys are saying. Maybe you can try to root your broken branch and make a new tree with it. That's true. You could. It's already got beautiful movement. I mean, boom. Boom. Oh, I just broke it. Never mind. What's the plan? Wire this tree. Make it look real good. Sam has already pushed my my ambitions higher than ever before and suggested that I take this to the kokufu, which being the only winter honeysuckle, I think the novelty factor alone, also given that I work for Mirai, I think by default I'll get at least first place.
I can assure you the kokufu doesn't care about Mirai.
What about removing the two far right secondary branches you just said you want to bring forward?
I gotta say, I agree with it, Josh.
Removing these two?
Okay, so here's the deal, right? When creating asymmetry in design, and there's nobody saying you have to create asymmetry, but asymmetry is what gives you the impression of age as well as flow, right? And that generates visual interest. Josh has pushed a lot of the tree to the left, but he's got this sort of equivalent length on the right side. And you say, okay, are you gonna compress the right and run out on the left? Or are you gonna compress the left and run out on the right? And I think that's where some of the feedback about shortening that piece on the right and pushing out to the left, because his apex is headed to the left, the highest point on the tree, and he's got this beautiful branch headed to the left that was, let's just go back, the original point that he tapped into that made him fall in love with this piece of material. How about just getting rid of the whole long straight trunk on the right, just work with the other tree? Now obviously that's a tempting notion to get rid of the long straight section on the right. However, if you lose that long straight section on the right, you have three lines that all have the same movement through the midsection of the tree. I think there are short interior branches that we could reduce to, or potentially pruning it to shorten that piece on the right all the way back to bare wood, and because it's a honeysuckle or a deciduous tree, it will bud again. See, that's already better. That's already better. I definitely think I should wire the rest of it first before I make that choice. Take it out. Yes. Oh. Let's see. Okay. Struggle bus. Struggle bus. Oh man. I'm trying to imagine where the secondaries are going to go. I think the left side feels pretty okay. There's a little spider. Come on, dude. Go over there for now. We're back. We're back to the branch. We're back to it again. There we go. What if I remove the far left branch? Oh, I really love this branch. Man. But let me see. Yeah. Again, you have to have your design principles. Like. Compress on the right, push out to the left. Compress on the left, push out to the right. Which one's it going to be? All right. I think I'm going to take a break from this and come back to it and then finish it up. I'm going to dabble, and you guys will see where this goes, but I think this will be the last stream for this tree for structural wiring. See you later. I would react more strongly to the final impression that I have of Josh's work, but having seen the pine make the tremendous transition from on video to what Josh did with it afterwards, I anticipate the honeysuckle being far better than what we ended up with. Great first effort, but the most important point, Josh is going to find inspiration. He's going to be looking for images. He's going to be looking at the natural growth habit of deciduous trees. That is how we learn how to style bonsai and generate aesthetic in the material that we're working with. Wow, you changed because originally you were moving to everything to the left, and this length over here you were fighting so sort of continuously, but you made the commitment. Boy, that's a dramatic difference.
So yeah, I made some commitments, obviously, and I also was kind of forced to because there were quite a few branches that broke. My last decisions that I was trying to make for this before I kind of let some more secondaries grow was making a decision with this mess over here on the right side of the tree, because I think there's maybe one too many branches.
I think it's a contrast to the other pieces of the tree because there aren't as many branches, but I don't necessarily know that there are too many. I think the other pieces of the tree need to catch up, right? And so I guess my feedback is I love the commitment to direction. Originally it was moving to the left and the right. I thought you would potentially shorten on the right and move to the left. You actually shortened on the left and moved to the right, and I think it really takes advantage of the length and the interest, right? Because you have a really solid base. I think the consistency of the movement is wonderful in design, and I think with that transition and all the things you learned about the difference between wiring a deciduous versus a pine is you recognize, oh, they break a lot easier, right? And I think this branch sets the tone for what you are expecting with the other pieces, and I really think where you're headed is pretty brilliant. I'm consistently impressed with what this turns into from the last thing I see to what I get to witness at the end product. I don't know how you go from what I'm seeing in the videos to what's here, but you're turning a corner between sort of this thing that happens on video and then the next time we see you, it's like, what, you completely restyled this in a way that's dramatically better. What just happened?
It came down to really spending a lot of time with the tree and thinking through without any distractions, like what the tree was kind of telling me with where it already was going and the features of the tree that really stood out to me, and I kind of just embraced them and kind of pushed that direction. But yeah, it came down to really taking my time and being patient and just as thoughtful as I could with what knowledge I have.
Cool. Very, very cool. Awesome. No, this is a wonderful transformation. Very nice, Josh. Making bonsai.
I've got a sore thumb. Guys, let me tell you, I went skiing. It was actually last winter, the end of spring, and I hit a jump pretty hard, pretty quick at Timberline here on Mount Hood. And I went like this, my whole body went up, and then as I was falling down, I put my arm out and I landed, all my weight went on my thumb, and it's still to this day is really sore, and I'm feeling that right now.
He used this excuse when he was wiring the Taxus as well. This is a thing that we've heard a lot at Mirai.